Pokemon Red, Blue, and Green were all made by a small team of developers, which led to rather unexpected issues in the gameplay department, some of which may have led to certain Pokemon being a bit more powerful than intended. So today, we're going to go over Pokemon who got buffed purely by accident, and explain what went wrong. Starting off at number 10, we have Hitmonlee, who is a pure fighting type with an incredible 120 attack and a fairly decent 87 speed. However, the rest of its stats are just miserable, with none of them even breaking 50, and its special being especially miserable at a pitiful 35. Hitmonlee is really nothing special in Generation 1, especially with how weak the fighting type is overall. With 2 brutal weaknesses in Flying and Psychic, it makes you wonder what makes Hitmonlee so special. Well, Hitmonlee was given a signature move called High Jump Kick, which is a base 85 power fighting type move that is supposed to have a brutal drawback of dealing 40% recoil damage if the attack misses. High Jump Kick has a 90% accuracy, which doesn't sound too bad until you realize that in Pokemon, if a move is not 100% accurate, then you could believe it has a 10% accuracy instead. However, due to an issue in coding, High Jump Kick deals a whopping 1 HP of damage back to Hitmonlee if it misses, so it realistically has no drawback. Hitmonlee isn't an incredible Pokemon, but that one exploit does allow it to edge out over its counterpart Hitmonchan and even faster fighting types like Primeape, due to them lacking a fighting type move as good as High Jump Kick. However, Hitmonlee does struggle with being really hard to obtain, as you get a choice in Saffron City between Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan. But that's the only one of the two that you get the entire game, so you're just out of luck if you choose Hitmonchan instead, who's so unremarkable it doesn't even have a signature move to call its own. Hitmonlee isn't a very good Pokemon, but considering how unusable its counterpart is, and the rough spot fighting types find themselves in, Hitmonlee does the most with what it has. And at number 9, we have Venomoth, which is a bug and poison type with a rather rough stat spread of 70 HP, 65 attack, and a miserable 60 defense. However, it does have a decent 90 speed and special, which does put it above some other bug type competition like Butterfree. Venomoth is rather unremarkable as a Pokemon who at first glance seems entirely forgettable. However, it does have access to the insane Sleep Powder. This is a 75% accurate status move that simply puts the opposing Pokemon to sleep. Sleep in Generation 1 lasts for 1 to 7 turns, with 1 additional turn to wake up, and during those turns you literally cannot do anything. You effectively just lose a Pokemon unless you get incredibly lucky with your sleep turns. Venomoth actually has another trick up its sleeve besides only putting things to sleep, as it has access to the powerful Psychic to deal some actual damage. Venomoth surprisingly isn't that let down by being a poison type, as down in the never used tier it resides in, the common Mr. Mime isn't too fond of eating a sleep powder trying to deal with it. Venomoth's true Achilles heel resides in its bug typing, as that gives it a brutal weakness to fire. And considering Charizard is known as a top 3 Pokemon in the entire tier, Venomoth is far from ideal in most battles. Venomoth does have a place in playthroughs though, as you can obtain one right after the Electric Gym, and it's arguably the best bug type who isn't confined to the Safari Zone. Venomoth does have a bit of a problem in playthroughs as it's weak to the Fire Gym, and has a rough type with most of the Elite Four. However, clicking Sleep Powder and Psychic is enough to carve out a place in any team who wants to click Swords Dance and sweep without a second thought. And at number 8, we have Nidoking, which is a poison and ground type with a fairly mediocre stat spread of 75 special, 77 defense, 81 HP, 85 speed, and a decent 92 attack. Nidoking at first glance actually seems incredible, as its move pool is one of the deepest in the entire game. And you can obtain a Nidoran on the second route and evolve it right after you beat the Rock Gym. Nidoking has a ton of great traits that are only let down by its poor stats, as Poison is not a very defensive type, especially in Generation 1. Even though Venomoth was able to get around this with its decent 90 speed, 85 speed is just far too slow, especially for a Pokemon who isn't even that bulky. Nidoking is saved thanks to an exploit in the first generation due to the one-hit KO moves. There are 3 one-hit KO moves in Generation 1, Fissure, Horn Drill, and Guillotine, and all 3 do exactly as you'd expect. They KO the opponent in one shot if they connect. However, their accuracy is unimaginably terrible to compensate, with not a single one over 30%. The reason Nidoking is saved thanks to these moves is that in Generation 1, the item X accuracy was coded so that if you had taken a single X accuracy during a battle, you effectively could never miss an attack. And as we mentioned earlier, Nidoking was incredibly easy to obtain, and it naturally learned Horn Drill at level 36. so you could extremely easily sweep the entire game by buying a handful of accuracies and going to town. One-hit KO moves do have one more restriction, as you need to be faster than your target. However, even though Nidoking has awful speed, you could simply use the item X speed to give it a small 1.5x boost to its speed to easily make up for that issue. Now, this is all good for a playthrough, but in competitive, you're not allowed to use items. So this entire strategy goes down the drain. Nidoking struggles due to being weak to Psychic, Water, and even Ground type due to its Poison typing, which means it really cannot switch in on anything. And even though it has phenomenal coverage, it's so slow that it has a rough time actually making use of its decent attacking stats. Ironically, Nidoking resides in the never used tier with its fellow poison, Venomoth, where Venomoth is the best counter to Nidoking in the entire tier. As Nidoking is so pitifully slow, it can be put to sleep in a heartbeat. However, Nidoking is loved due to its insane coverage, as it's known as one of the most diverse Pokemon in the entire tier. And its insane potential for a playthrough allows Nidoking to just barely slide into the number 8 slot. And at number 7, we have Hypno, which is a pure Psychic type with a decent 70 defense, 73 attack, and 85 HP. Hypno does have a quite bad 67 speed, but its insane 115 special more than makes up for that weakness. Hypno is a pure Psychic type, and that could honestly be where we end this segment. The Psychic type is the best type in Generation 1 due to effectively having no weaknesses. The Bug type was awful, and the only halfway viable Bug type is carried entirely by the broken sleep mechanic, and the other, quote, weakness was the Ghost type, which due to a coding error was actually not super effective against Psychic in Gen 1. And the singular Ghost type in Generation 1 was also part Poison, so it was also just plain weak to Psychic to make it even worse. Meaning, the Psychic type quite literally had no weaknesses in Gen 1, besides a type so bad, their best attack in Gen 1 was the base 25 Twin Needle. Hypno has a decent move pool with access to Hypnosis, Psychic, and Thunder Wave. While Thunder Wave was worse than Hypnosis on paper, Thunder Wave has 100% accuracy, so it was a far safer move to click if you were worried about getting demolished if you missed the sleep, and were too slow to get a second chance. Hypno is accessible right after the Water Gym, and basically always has the move Hypnosis, so it's extremely useful for a playthrough, as putting everything to sleep makes it incredibly easy to catch wild Pokemon. And the Psychic typing is amazing versus the Poison Gym and 2 of the Elite 4 members. Hypno is an interesting place competitively, as it's not very good in the overused tier, but was so good that it got banned from the underused tier, being stuck in a tier known as Borderline, which is just a holding zone for Pokemon who aren't that strong, but way too broken for a tier below. Hypno isn't the best Psychic type, as its speed and physical defense really let it down. But that should show you just how broken the Psychic type is, that a Pokemon this mediocre is banned from ever touching a lower tier again. And at number 6, we have Victreebel, which is a Poison Grass type Pokemon with a fairly mediocre 70 speed, 65 defense, but a modest 80 HP and incredibly good 100 special and 105 attack. Victreebel is one of 3 Poison and Grass types in Generation 1, and easily the best due to 2 factors. 1, for its higher attack than Venusaur, and 2, for having access to the broken move Wrap. Wrap in Generation 1 is a 15 base power normal type move that simply restricts your opponent's Pokemon for 2 to 5 turns, leaving them unable to move until the Wrap misses or until they switch out. Wrap isn't the only reason Victreebel is good, as its attack and stats in general are incredible. 100 special attack is enough that a Razor Leaf does a clean 35% to the mighty Snorlax. Razor Leaf also has a high crit chance, which in Generation 1 basically means you have a 50-50 chance of getting a crit and absolutely tearing through the entire team. Victreebel also has access to everyone's favorite status, Sleep, as it has access to Sleep Powder. And while it's not incredibly fast, if it can fire off a Sleep or Stun Powder and land the attack, it's basically impossible to ever get a hit on Victreebel unless you swap out. Victreebel is a terror in the competitive scene, and even casually as you can obtain a Bellsprout right before battling the Water-type Misty. And immediately after, you can head to Celadon City to grab a Leaf Stone so you can have a Victreebel ready for Gym 4 at the latest. And at that point, Victreebel can clean up a good chunk of the gyms and the Elite 4 on its own. Victreebel has the same weakness as the other 2 Poison types on this list, as it has the Poison type weakness to Psychic, so it struggles fairly often against the most powerful Pokemon in the game. Victreebel is a great Pokemon who's only brought down by its rough weakness to Psychic, and its very lackluster physical bulk, but it's still a powerhouse and well deserving in the number 6 spot. And at number 5, we have Jynx, which is a Psychic and Ice type with a bizarre 35 defense, 50 attack, and 65 HP, along with a solid 95 in special and speed. At first glance, Jynx doesn't seem like anything special. Just another frail Pokemon carried entirely by being the psychic type, which isn't entirely far off. Ice is also a really bad type defensively, as it's weak to fire and the ever common rock type, and gives you quite literally no added resistances besides to other ice types. However, in Generation 1, there were two factors which made being an ice type extra valuable. The first reason was that the freeze status was unimaginably broken. If the previously mentioned sleep status was a free KO, then freeze might as well just delete an entire Pokemon from your opponent's team. In Generation 1, there was no move to directly apply freeze, such as how Thunder Wave allows paralysis on your opponent's Pokemon. But to make up for that, if you ever got frozen, you could not thaw out unless hit by a fire type attack. This effectively meant, unless you were the smartest player in history and got lucky that your opponent had a Pokemon with all 4 attacks being fire type, you were never thawing out that Pokemon. The only way to apply freeze in Gen 1 was to use an ice type attack such as Blizzard or Ice Beam, which all had a 10% chance of freezing your opponent's Pokemon. And Jynx was one of the best at spamming Blizzard thanks to being decently fast and hitting hard enough that even without a freeze, a stray Blizzard could take chunks out of even the bulkiest neutral walls. Before we get too far, we should mention that there's a glitch where using the move Haze would thaw your opposing Pokemon out, but that also requires your opponent to basically be working for you for it to work. Jynx benefits due to another exploit in Generation 1 where the fire type did not resist the ice type. So even if Charizard and Moltres can destroy Jynx if they land a Fire Blast, they can never actually switch in on a Jynx as a single Blizzard puts them out of commission entirely. All of this bundled with Jynx's access to the 75 accurate Lovely Kiss to put your opponent to sleep, meant that Jynx was one of the most unique Pokemon in the entire overused tier. In playthroughs, Jynx was also amazing due to being accessible from a trade before the second gym. So gaining a Psychic and Ice type that early in the run means you were almost never in any real danger besides the Fire Gym. Jynx does have a few major issues, however. As you can see, its defenses are painfully bad. And while decently fast, Jynx doesn't really stand out in the OU tier as most Pokemon have 100 speed at least. Jynx also struggles with any Pokemon which can eat an Ice or Psychic move and attack back, as basically any attack puts Jynx out of commission. Overall, Jynx is a good Pokemon whose niche can't really be replicated by anyone, so it definitely deserves the number 5 spot on this list. And at number 4, we have Cloyster, which is a water and ice type with a rather poor HP stat of 50, with a speed stat of 70, but that's where its bad stats end. Cloyster has a solid 85 special and 95 attack, and an astronomical 180 defense stat, giving it the highest defense in the entire game. Cloyster is obviously an amazing wall, but that's not the only reason it's good. Cloyster was also blessed with its very own unique signature move named Clamp. Clamp is a 35 base power water move with the exact same effect as the previously mentioned Wrap, where it traps your opponent's Pokemon for 2 to 5 turns, leaving them powerless to do anything except switch out or hope you miss the Clamp. Cloyster abuses Clamp more than any other Pokemon abuse Wrap due to 2 reasons. One being that Cloyster is a water type, so it gains the 1.5 times stab boost to the move, making it hit even harder. And secondly, Clamp has 20 more power than Wrap, so it's just an upgrade in every way. Cloyster also benefits for a similar reason as Jynx, as it can fire off blizzards with its respectable 85 special and pray it lands a devastating freeze. Cloyster even has the move Explosion, so at any point it can fire off an effective base 340 move to take out anything in a pinch. Cloyster is just a pile of broken attributes in one Pokemon, along with the fact that it's easy to obtain, as directly after the 3rd gym, you can get a Shelter with a Super Rod, along with evolving at the Celadon department store immediately. This means you can use it to easily tear through the Fire, Ground, and Grass gym along with 2/4 of the Elite Four. Cloyster does have a few genuine problems that locks it to the number 4 slot. Cloyster really only has water and ice coverage, so Pokemon like Starmie and Slowbro can take advantage of it. And its special defense and HP aren't nearly as good as its physical defense, so electric types like the common Zapdos can destroy it if they can safely switch in on it. However, even with these checks, Cloyster is a phenomenal wall that's always threatening whenever you see it hit the field, making it a powerhouse well deserving of the spot on this list. And at number 3, we have the previously mentioned Slowbro, which is a water and psychic type with a rough 35 speed, but a decent 75 attack, 80 special, along with a great 95 HP and 110 defense. Slowbro is known in the competitive Pokemon for a set effectively claimed as its own, Amnesia Slowbro. Amnesia is a boosty move that simply gives you a +2 in special, which in Generation 1 means both your special defense and attack are boosted by 2. And for a special attacker and a wall like Slowbro, this boost is incredible. Slowbro was the absolute best legal user of Amnesia, which quickly became its calling card. as the combination is infamous in how powerful it is, and how after one Amnesia boost, a single Slowbro can demolish almost any team. This is one of the reasons in Generation 2, Amnesia was nerfed to only raise special defense, as once the stat splits into two, they decided to gut the move in order to keep more special threats from being as centralizing as Slowbro. Slowbro also has one of the best move pools in the entire game, having access to moves like Fire Blast, Ice Beam, and Psychic for coverage, and Thunder Wave to make up for its lackluster speed. Slowbro is fine in playthroughs, as you can obtain one after getting the Super Rod, similar to Cloyster. So it's really just a choice and preference, as Shellder learns Clamp 20 levels before Slowbro learns Amnesia. But Slowbro has a better overall move pool. Slowbro over the years has become less of a staple, as people have found more ways to exploit it, as any Pokemon that can do something like put it to sleep or just capitalize on its low speed by fishing for critical hits can make setting up difficult, along with Pokemon who aren't very threatened by its stab combination like Starmie just sitting on it. Similarly, Pokemon can just click Explosion and try to finish off a weakened Slowbro, as Slowbro lacking its own form of recovery is a major hindrance to its consistency on a game-to-game basis. Slowbro is iconic to the generation, as is the move it exploited to become a household name, but over the years they both have fallen somewhat out of favor. But there's still a powerhouse that can absolutely demolish entire teams if you accidentally give them an opening. And at number 2, we have Chansey, which is a pure normal type with a bizarre stat spread, as its speed is 50, its attack and defense are both 5, making it the lowest in the entire game. However, Chansey has a great 105 special and an astronomical 250 HP. And to this day, only one Pokemon has higher HP than Chansey, and that's its evolution introduced in the next generation. Chansey is known as one of the big 3 in Generation 1's overused tier, as it's on nearly every single competitively viable team ever created. Chansey is one of the few Pokemon in the game capable of consistently checking the terrifying Psychic types, as there's almost no way to actually damage it with special attacks. And with Psychic being a special type, this means that Chansey can just sit on tons of the strongest Pokemons in the game. Now, you may be wondering how Chansey is better than intended, because wouldn't a stat in the 200s imply they knew Chansey would be good? Well, on paper, yes, but there's no way we could talk about the mechanics that made Pokemon too good and not mention the pre-special split. As we've alluded to in Generation 1, Special was 1 stat instead of 2, as it is for the rest of the franchise. While usually this was fine, some Pokemon got some of the most insane stat spreads in the franchise due to how their stats were distributed. Case in point, Chansey. In Generation 2, once the special stat split, Chansey kept its 105 special defense, but was left with a miserable special attack of 35, meaning it was basically useless offensively. The opposite example is the Pokemon Alakazam, who had a massive 135 special, but once the special split happened, it ended up with a far lower 85 special defense, making it far more frail in comparison. In general, the pre-special split led to tons of Pokemon being far bulkier or stronger offensively than intended, with Chansey being the prime example of this issue. In Generation 1, Chansey is not only a phenomenal wall, but a phenomenal special attacker due to its deep move pool containing Fire Blast, Thunderbolt, Psychic, and Blizzard, and the reliable Soft Boil to heal 50% of its gargantuan HP whenever you feel like making the battle even more impossible for your opponent. Chansey is pretty much unusable in a playthrough, however, as it is famous for being nearly impossible to find in the Safari Zone, and its only other spawn location is a cave you unlock after you beat the Elite Four in Champion. Even if Chansey is a competitive staple, there are some ways to effectively deal with it. Sleep is Chansey's worst nightmare, as it's so slow, nearly every mon with Sleep Powder or Hypnosis can force it to switch, or risk being chipped into lethal range by a physical attacker like Snorlax. Rhydon is also an excellent choice to deal with Chansey, as besides Ice Beam, there really isn't a way for Chansey to deal with a Rhydon, as Rhydon can reliably 2-hit KO Chansey with Earthquake. Chansey is an icon to Generation 1 thanks to being an incredible wall, but also inadvertently an incredible special attacker as well. And there's only one Pokemon fit to overshadow a member of the big 3. And at number 1, we have the icon of Generation 1, Tauros, which is another pure normal type with 70 special, 75 HP, along with an insane 95 defense, 100 attack, and 110 speed. Tauros is to Generation 1 as Pikachu is to the anime. The entire competitive game revolves around Tauros, from its absolute bonkers stat spread to its great move pool with all of the moves you'd come to expect in Blizzard, Fire Blast, Thunderbolt, and the main topic of this section, Hyper Beam. Hyper Beam is a base 150 normal type move that makes the user unable to move after you click it. Well, it would if it didn't have an exploit in Generation 1, where if you kill the Pokemon you hit with Hyper Beam, then you don't have to recharge and can instead keep doing whatever you want. Tauros is the icon because of how much it benefits from just blasting hyper beams left and right, as thanks to its insane coverage, it's incredibly hard to switch on a Tauros safely. You want to protect your Jynx from a fire blast, so you switch to Rhydon? Well, Tauros players predicted that and fired off a blizzard, and now you've lost your Rhydon. Tauros is so unimaginably strong that its main contenders are opposing Tauros, and the simple fact that you only have 4 move slots in battle. Entire battles can be played waiting to see what the 4th move on your opponent's Tauros is, where you're waiting to see if you can beat it with your Cloyster, or if it has Thunderbolt and you need an Executor to deal with it. Tauros is rather weak to statuses like Paralysis or Sleep, removing its insane speed from the equation, but actually keeping a Pokemon alive to tank a hit and paralyze Tauros is far easier said than done. Tauros does have the same issues in a playthrough as Chansey, as it's in the Safari Zone. But if you manage to find one, you basically beat the game right there. Tauros is the face of Generation 1 overused, and even if you always know Body Slam followed by Hyper Beam is coming, barely anything can actually stand up to its overwhelming power.